So, hi friends, how are you this evening? I am Pat Infante. I'm part of the Central East Regional staff. I'm coming to you from a hotel room in West Virginia. I'm on the road on my way to our staff retreat, which is taking place in Columbus, Ohio, for the next few days. So we're going to take about an hour this evening to talk a little bit about the role of parents in our religious education landscape, and what are some of the ways that we can work with them, partner with them to make coming to the congregation, the fellowship, participating in faith community, to make that a priority in their life, and how we can influence that and help them make good decisions. So welcome. I think I just did the welcome in the overview. I forgot I had this slide, but I do want to just also, honor the lighting of our chalice. Just take a moment to take a breath and to think about our chalice and all the light that it brings to us and this Unitarian Universalist faith. So I'm glad that you're here. So moving right into the content here. This is an expression that has been around. I've been in religious education for more than 20 years, and this is language that I've heard, this idea that parents are the primary religious educator for their children. I think the understanding of that and the role of parents has probably been around since the time of Sophia Lyon-Fahs, which goes back to the 1940s. So we've talked about that. I think that many religious educators are sort of steeped in that belief, and yet we don't always know how to make that kind of come alive in our own program. How do we make sure that the parent understands what their role is, and how do we support them in their role as primary religious educator? There's a lovely little book. It's called The Gift of Faith, and it's been around for a while, but maybe there's a copy on your bookshelf or on the bookshelf in your office, left there by a previous colleague. It's called The Gift of Faith by Jean Neujar. And in there she says these words: parental influence is enormous. It's the parents who affirm and reinforce particular religious ideas and discount others. It's the stories told by the parents that are held closest to the heart, and the images offered by parents that have the greatest power. It's the language used by parents that becomes familiar and comfortable, with nuances of meaning carried in the tone of voice and the stance of the body. So, one of the things that is part of our work is an understanding of sort of why are we doing this work? What is happening with our young children, with our elementary and middle school children, and our high school youth? What is the work that they're doing that we are supporting, that all of our, kind of the purpose of our program? And this comes from another lovely little book. I'm a book person. It's called Nurturing Children and Youth, and it's by Tracy Hurd, H-U-R-D, and there may be a copy of that on your bookshelf as well. It was a book that was published by Skinner House, I believe, published by the UUA when Tracy was the head of the Faith Development Office a number of years ago. I'm not sure that it's still in print, but it's a book that I recommend. And in that, she offers up, and if you've done some of the Renaissance modules, you may have also seen some of these models of development. where children are at certain ages, what their needs are, and how we can best support them. And this book by Tracy really lays that out in an easy format. So spiritually, children develop into a person who may consciously embody spirituality, faith, and sometimes religion. So we can be spiritual without participating in an organized religious setting. And morally, so we're often concerned also with the moral development of our children. And so morally basic understandings of right and wrong. And we know if we're using Tapestry of Faith or if we're using any number of other independent curricula, that those things are often woven into the curriculum. Tools and stories and activities that are aimed at helping move that spiritual and moral development along in developmentally appropriate ways. And then finally, Tracy says, children are always learning about who they are. So it's interesting that that's the work that our children are doing. So our work is to create this institutional structure that supports that process for children and youth and adults. Some of us are working with adults. But we're doing that when, in fact, we don't have the most opportunity with children. I think something I read, it may have been in Tracy's book, estimates that we in our religious education programs often have maybe 50 hours a year with our children, if that. And parents have, thousands of hours over the time that they're actively parenting their children to influence them. And yet somehow it feels as though the scales are tipped in support of the institution, that it's our work, that it's our job. And we provide the structure and we provide the content a lot of times, we think. But in fact, the parents are providing a lot of the structure and a lot of the content as well. So I just want to take a couple minutes and feel free to share things that I didn't capture here. Just wanted to kind of make some observations about today's parents. Today's parents are, many of our parents of our younger children are sort of the older end of the millennials, and also we have the tail end of Generation X. Some of them were unchurched as children, and they don't have necessarily the relevant, organized institutional experience to draw from. Everybody has, stories of wonder, stories of awe, and origin of the world, origin of their own family, origin of themselves. Those stories are embedded in their experience. But they're not many, since Unitarian Universalism is largely folks who come in from either another faith or from no, without any previous religious experience, they may have a very limited knowledge of what it means to be Unitarian Universalist and what that means as a parent. How do I tell my children the stories if I don't know the stories, if I didn't experience the stories that are really meaningful and that might really impact their development of a Unitarian Universalist identity? Some parents actively resist the role. They say, hey, religion let me down when I was young, or I had some experiences that I'm still carrying with me, and I don't want to do that work. I want you in the religious education program to tell them what they need to know. That's not not a realistic, perhaps, way of lens through which to look at this work, because again, parents are the primary educators, the primary religious educators. They are the ones who are there. They are the ones who are experiencing spiritual moments and engaging in spiritual practice with their children 7 days a week for hours a day. Some folks don't understand that their children and their youth are going through a process, through a developmental process. We think of our children's development, we think of how tall they are, we think of where they are on the weight chart, we think of when they start reading, and we think of development in many different ways, but we don't always, as parents, think about what it means for our children to go through a process of spiritual development. And this is a place where we can be helpful. We can help them to understand what kinds of things children might be experiencing, how they might be seeing the world, what they might need, what are some of the ways that we can help them to grow in a spiritual sense. Today's parents, many of them are not in traditional families, and that's just an observation. Whether it has an impact on the spiritual development, is not always true, but there may be times when I know that there are some families that will attend one type of faith community one Sunday, and maybe come to our faith community on another Sunday. And so there are the ways that families are coming together and coming apart at times can create confusion for children that can make our job more difficult. And some parents are just overwhelmed. Some parents are not thinking about the spiritual development of their children because they're just living their lives, and we all are. We're all overwhelmed by the social media and the news and many in our work and all of that. So, is there anything else others have observed about today's parents that might have sort of some bearing on how they might participate in faith community, or how they might be managing their role as primary religious educator? Anybody have any thoughts on that? Feel free to chat or unmute if you would like to unmute.
Pat, one of the things that I have seen in our congregation, and even when I was just teaching in early childhood, is just sort of a difference. There's lots of differences in what folks are looking for, what they think childhood should look like. So there's people who really love to have a pageant, and there's other people who don't like to see their kids set on stage, and there's people who really want to push their kids, and there's just all sorts of differences that way. And then it becomes tricky for us to help parents come to consensus. I know one of the tricky spots for us has been, we've done a lot of work just around whether the moment for all ages, are we going to call children forward or not? And people had differing strong opinions around that and what they wanted for their children.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, that's, I totally agree with that. And I know that idea of children with the time for all ages has been around for a long time. Leslie says, often parents don't understand the world that their children and youth are living in, and the technical challenges are just too much for some adults. Oh, absolutely. That's a great observation. That's good. Good. So I just want to touch on, again, and this kind of goes hand in hand with some of the observations we make about parents. What are the needs? What are the needs of parents today, the parents that we're encountering in our programs? And I think that it's pretty much, in most cases, we go on the assumption that most parents want to be good parents. They want to do what's right for their children. They want to provide them with the kinds of exposure and experience and community that will help them grow into good, morally sound adults. And I think that's what, sort of at the most simple level, most of today's parents. And so I'm also using the term parents sort of generically, and I realize that parents can feel like it excludes grandparents who are raising their grandchildren, or other kinds of family ways of coming together. So whatever kind of family we're imagining, there is an adult who is in that sort of traditional societal role of parent, and that's who I'm speaking about. So the question, as religious educators and religious leaders in our congregation, we need to ask ourselves, a few questions. Are we providing these parents what they need? Are we providing them the tools that they need to be the primary religious educator? Are we providing them the kinds of experiences that are meaningful and that will make them want to make coming to the Sunday meeting a priority in their life? And our families have so many choices that they can make, and we can't capture the imagination and the heart of every family that comes through our door. There are some families who are just going to make other choices at other times. But are we listening? Are we listening to our parents? Do we have some kind of feedback loop, some kind of mechanism? How are we building relationship with parents so that we understand what it is they need to be the good parents that we think most of them yearn to be? And who else is doing that work? Too often, sort of the strategic heart of this falls on the religious educator. The expectation is that the DRE coordinator, the DLFD, the DLM, whatever, DFM, whatever role, however your role is named, it really carries the weight of that on their shoulders in that role. But there are other people that are important to that. So I think an important question to think about when we're thinking about how we're engaging with families and with parents is, what are we offering? What are we offering them besides an opportunity to volunteer? We're very focused on bringing recruitment and getting volunteers and filling our classroom with teachers. But what are we able to offer our families? I have some thoughts on that. If others have thoughts on that, feel free to either unmute or to write in the chat box. I think that for me, there's three really key things that we offer, and one is we offer community. We all can find spiritual moments. We can engage in spiritual practice. We can have transformative experiences alone on an individual basis. But what makes our congregations different and makes them something that families should be seeking out is that there's a community. We are doing this work in community, and there are some transformative moments that can't happen when you're just by yourself or you're just with a small family group. So it's a range of opportunity, and one of those opportunities is to be in community, to worship in community, to do social justice in community, to learn together, all of those things. I think the other key thing that we offer is ritual. Families have rituals, the way we do things, our Thanksgiving rituals, our holiday rituals, our bedtime rituals, our mealtime rituals, but churches have rituals as well. And the idea of a child lighting a chalice. The first time a family, maybe a young child, gets to come up to the front of the church and actually light the chalice is a very meaningful and memorable moment. There are rituals in congregations around holidays. There are rituals around just coffee hour. Coffee hour is an amazing ritual. And there's some certainly some stories that go along with that. I think the third thing that we offer is we offer a story. We offer a unique narrative, which is the Unitarian Universalist story. What do we believe? How do we live out our values? Who are the thought people who have brought us to this place? What is the history that we carry forward? All of those things. There's a unique story that belongs to Unitarian Universalism, and folks can go online and can learn about that, but they can't do it in community. They can't experience it in quite the same way. Anything else? Other thoughts on what we offer? And every congregation has different things that they offer. So, anybody? Any thoughts coming to mind? That's okay if they aren't. So has everybody heard about family ministry? Are folks familiar with that term? Somebody was typing here and I missed. Let me go back here. Leslie says we offer adults the opportunity to interact with children that share their values. That's great. Yeah, I love that. What a great insight. So we're using this terminology. We're moving into a time where we're reimagining what it means to be together, how we are together on Sunday morning, and we're focusing on several things. One of them is bringing children into worship in different ways. So some congregations have the story for all ages, and the children are in for maybe a hymn and maybe joys and concerns, and maybe sometimes even the offering, and then they might go out for a time in their individual classrooms. Family ministry encourages us to have more multi-generational opportunities for adults and children and youth, all to be worshiping together in the same space, in the same way, with the same activities, the same words, the same music, and everybody's experiencing it at their own developmentally appropriate way. So a young person can listen to a sermon and may not have the same kind of intellectual engagement with it, but they're learning language. They're watching adults. They're watching role models around them. So there's always learning that's happening when we all stay together in worship. Other adults in the worship maybe are experiencing things that they haven't necessarily had an opportunity to experience. They may be doing movement. They may be doing some things that are more playful that we introduce when we have all ages in worship. We're also experiencing people around us of different ages and experience. We are such an age-segregated society. We put our children in age-segregated rooms and close the door. We send our adults off to offices where they work all day and they're separated from their young children. And then we have adult living communities where we send our folks who are over 55 and maybe grandparent age. So there isn't as much mixing and blending of the of the different generations as there might have been in another time. And that's a relatively recent kind of societal shift. And we want to, try to push back against that. We want to find opportunities to bring the generations together. Older folks can delight in the wonder and the playfulness of young children, and young children can learn and observe and feel comforted by older adults who are with them. So the other thing that kind of shifts with this idea of family ministry is that we want families to participate. We expect them to come and to be there. There's no more drop-off, right? Not that anybody necessarily has a drop-off, but there are some congregations where there was a history of that, where parents literally would drop their children off, and the children would go for religious education, and the parents would go and have a cup of coffee down the street and then come back. But our shift is that this is a family experience, and it changes it when you are all experiencing it together. Is there anybody doing family ministry on this call? And I'm just wondering if you've seen if you have any other expectations about what family ministry might bring.
I'm sort of starting an experiment this year. I'm introducing the terminology family ministry. It's not something that's happening during the service, but after the service. We're doing something, I'm choosing activities that are advertised as having a focus on families, but everyone's invited. I'm really talking up the intergenerational opportunities.
That's great.
So the first one we'll be doing is at the end of the month, and it's kind of like a kindness project. We're making something that's being donated to a local organization for a particular cause, but it'll just get all of us there together, doing something meaningful together and sort of seeing where conversations progress. I really want to find out, what do people think of when they hear me using that phrase, family ministry, and we'll see where it goes from there.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, that sounds fabulous. And family ministry is more than just being together for worship. Family ministry does include finding different opportunities to be together, to have shared experiences with social justice, with just fellowship experiences. I've heard about game nights and lots of other kinds of intergenerational, multi-generational experiences. Jess says they're trying all ages worship 2 weeks a month and traditional RE other weeks. That's a great way. That's a great way to live into this idea of what it means to be, sharing in this family ministry idea. So start small, and some people appreciate that there's a choice, that some Sundays will be everybody and some Sundays may not. So Lizzie's gently trying to move to whole congregation worship as well. There's a new minister. So they've got a lot going on. Yeah. But I think that's a great conversation to have when there is a new minister that comes in. Because people are expecting some change when a new minister comes. So it can be a kind of a way to kind of sort of sneak in a little bit of experimentation. But yeah, that's good. All right, so another component that's kind of part of this idea of family ministry is the idea of full week faith. And this was a term that came out of some work out of the FOS Collaborative, out of Meadville Lombard Theological School. And It was the work of Karen Bellefonte's Grace, who's my colleague on the New England regional staff. And it was, how it was, the idea of it was, how do we engage the family at home? How do we either provide resources, or how do we just sort of deepen that connection between what happens on Sunday and what happens during the week? And again, this book, The Gift of Faith, reminds us that not only are parents the primary religious educators, but the home is the center of religious development. So spiritual and religious development happens at the kitchen table. A lot of it happens at the kitchen table. And again, we have, somewhere between 35 and 50 hours in a program year with our young people, where families have, a much larger number of hours to influence their children. So, this is another part of how do we help families to really make coming to Sunday worship and coming to Sunday religious education a practice that they look forward to, and a practice that they make a priority in their lives. How are we supporting them during the week so that they feel that they continue to feel as connected on Tuesday or on Thursday evening as they might feel on Sunday? And there are lots of, there's lots of stuff happening, and we'll probably be looking at some of the home type activities in a future webinar. So what can we do? What can we do? Again, it feels as though this idea of helping parents to understand their role seems to fall to the religious educator in the congregation. There are some parents who understand that they have this responsibility, that they own this responsibility, that they are the primary religious educator. And there are others for whom that language doesn't quite, like, I don't know anything about religion. What do you mean I'm the person that's responsible? You're the one who's had the training. You're the one who knows what curriculum to use. And but it's not about curriculum. It's about, the curriculum is life. The curriculum is not a book that we happen to learn about when we went off to a Renaissance module. So we have to, part of our role is to educate parents in what it means, what is religious education, what is a spiritual education for a child, and how what happens on Sunday is really a small component of that, a small but meaningful component of that. So helping them understand that they have a role in this is really important. Helping them to understand what resources are available for them. That's a question I think parents are maybe a little reticent about answering. How do I do this? I don't know. I didn't grow up Unitarian Universalist. I don't know where to find this stuff. I don't even know where to begin. So how do we help them know what the work might be, what the resources might be, what are the best stories, where can they find those kinds of things? And some folks will say, oh, I don't have time for that, because there's a lot going on for all of us. But one of the ways that we can help parents is just to affirm for them that the rituals they're already engaging in, the stories that they're already sharing with their children, the experiences that they're having together on Sunday are all part of the story. They're all part of the work. And it's not about finding the right book or sending home a set of questions for them to talk about during the week. It's part of it is just acknowledging that our everyday interactions have spiritual significance. When we, as a family, when we experience some kind of tragedy, some kind of trauma, some kind of chaotic time, some kind of joyful event, some kind of something special and unexpected, that all of those things are part of the story of what makes our lives spiritual. Helping parents to understand that they need that whatever they can do is okay, that we meet families where they are. And sometimes I know that some folks use, again, these take-home sheets, and they say, oh, some people, they never get out of the fellowship hall, right? They leave them behind. And, I was up last night copying those, and people don't take them home. Everybody's in a different place. And if one family takes it home and finds meaning in it, or if one parent reads through, leaves it behind, and then later on in the week, something triggers the question or something triggers a reflection about something that happened in the previous Sunday, that's okay. That's how learning happens. I think it's really important for us as religious educators to think about what we can learn from parents. So not only what is it that they need, I think that's important for us to be listening to parents about what they need, but also what are parents' stories? What experiences did they have maybe as children? How can we share some of those experiences? How can we learn from parents what is actually happening with their family in the home? How do we lift up and amplify the exciting stories that are happening in some families? We're going to talk a little bit about that in just a minute, but people have things that happen, and how do we share that? Do we have joys and concerns for families? Or is joys and concerns only done in the classroom and only done with adults and it's done separately? How do families come together and share? We can also educate parents through some kind of small group ministry. It's hard to get people to commit to, some kind of an actual gathering, but we can have events that take place on a Friday night, a potluck, and have time for kids to do a craft and time for parents to talk for 20 or 30 minutes. And those can be really meaningful times. We need to inform them. We need to be in relationship with our parents. And the most important way is by us building relationship with them, but also facilitating building relationship amongst and between. We can, there was an article, I don't know if anybody saw this article, it came out, it was published in the Boston Globe, but it was from another publication, but it was talking about how adults make friends and how difficult it is for adults to make friends. And it said that I believe that for a person to feel as though someone is a casual friend, you have to spend 50 hours together with this person in some kind of meaningful engagement. And for you to feel that a person is a close friend, you have to spend like 200 hours with a person, right? Well, so we don't necessarily make that kind of time in our lives. And so how can we as a faith community kind of facilitate those times of bringing people together and giving them that space to engage for 2-3 hours at a time? And maybe over the course of several months, people will really begin to feel comfortable, will begin to feel connected. So we need to be building relationship with our parents and with our families, but we also need to be encouraging and facilitating relationship among. We need to be, Lizzie just talked about this, we need to be facilitating community building. Community is a really important part of what we offer, what differentiates us. This idea that we are coming together in community for worship, for social justice, for fellowship. So how do we facilitate that? And it's not just the religious educator who's doing that. There are there are hospitality committees. There are other events that happen at our congregation, a fellowship that can be that place where people get to know one another. It's really important. We can also, there are technological ways to keep people informed and to keep people connected. And this, some people will read emails and some people won't. So this is not, this is something we sort of need to do. It's part of our due diligence in our work that we need to send that email out every week, or we need to be connecting with people over some kind of social media. But it's not going to necessarily be the most, the longest sustained way of getting into relationship with folks. So if I haven't said it enough, I'll say it again. It's really all about relationship. So much of our work and so much of helping people to feel connected, helping people to really begin to own a community is what kind of and how many relationships they have in that place. And that's sometimes it varies with the size of the congregation. If you have a very small congregation, relationships happen very differently. We often in a small congregation will sort of get to a level of intimacy much faster, just because we're in smaller groups. The ideal group size for developing intimacy over time is 8 to 10. So if you're in a mid-sized congregation, you might not have that many opportunities to be in a group that size. If you're in a congregation of 25 or 50, a lot of events or a lot of meetings are going to be roughly in that size range. So, but relationship again is really key to keeping families connected, to keeping parents connected. We need to affirm the role and efforts of the parents. When they do fulfill that role, when they kind of take ownership of being the primary religious educator for their children. Who is affirming that in their lives but us? Who is going to say, wow, you did a great job at finding, helping your children with the pet goldfish that just died. There's not like a conversation that we necessarily have with our casual friends. So who is providing that affirmation for parents? Who's telling them that, yes, you're doing a good job, and yes, we see you in the work that you're trying to do. So part of our role is to find a place where they can tell those stories and amplify those stories. So it could be a bulletin board. It could be a place, just a testimony that we have a family come up and tell a story about something really exciting, some experience of wonder or awe that they shared as a family. It could be creating some kind of a ritual that honors parents and families. We have in our congregations, we have child dedication, and sometimes we have milestone recognitions. Most of us are familiar with either bridging or coming of age. Some congregations will do something around second grade, or maybe when they move up to the youth group. We have different recognition and affirmations that we do. How are we affirming families who are choosing to be with us, families who are connected and have taken and take their role as religious educators seriously. So maybe creating some kind of ritual that honors parents and families and caregivers. And it's really important for us to practice gratitude. How are we thanking people? When people come to us and tell a story, I think for many religious educators, it's so wonderful for when a family comes in on Sunday and they're so excited. They can't wait to tell you something. Something happened during the week that was meaningful to them because of maybe because of a story they heard, or maybe because of an experience they had in the classroom, and they can't wait to tell you. And are we thanking them? Are we finding ways to really to thank them for sharing their stories? Are we thanking parents for bringing their children? Children, particularly younger children, typically don't get to church on their own. So there's this this sort of dichotomy that happens in families where they it's the parents who kind of drive the process up to a certain age, and then it becomes the children or the youth who are really the decision makers about whether we're going to go to church. And are we thanking parents for the efforts of getting their children there? So gratitude is a great practice for us, and a great way to affirm that parents are doing some good things. I think it's helpful to create the places to share stories, stories of joy and concern, stories of success, stories of struggle. Families are struggling in many ways, and how do we share? We can create bulletin boards, and it can be pictures, and it can be artifacts of family life. So other things besides pictures of families, poems, something that somebody made, a piece of art or something like that. Do we have a bulletin board that really celebrates families? Do we have a place for the joys and concerns of families? Sometimes we have a children's chapel. Sometimes it's all together in the larger service, which is good. But sometimes it's also helpful to have a place, a quieter place, or just a place that doesn't feel as performative as going up in front of the whole congregation might feel to maybe, a 6-year-old. Is there a place where they can really share something that they're excited about, or something that has worried them? We can ask for midweek check-ins. We can do midweek check-ins with families just to see how things are going. And have you, if you have some kind of a take-home thing, have you had an opportunity to talk with one another about some of the things from last week's class, whatever. We can create social media that has a family focus. So we can create, I do know that there are some congregations that have a separate Facebook group just for families. And it's a closed group, but it's a place where families can share with one another. And we would, sort of facilitate and moderate that kind of a group. We can have small group ministry type gatherings, so not a specific covenant group or fellowship group or something with a soul matters content, but just a small group ministry style coming together. So you might have an occasional parenting group for the folks who are parenting middle school, a parenting group for folks who are parenting children with special needs or learning differences. So there's different ways that we can invite parents to come together to share their stories, and again, to build relationships. So that's what I put together for you for tonight. And I'd love to know, what are things that are working for you? What are your stories? How are parents engaging with with your program? Are you feeling frustrated about folks coming or not coming and that kind of thing? Anybody have anything? Did this kind of loosen anything up for you that you'd like to share?
We do have 2 different Facebook groups, and one is family focused, and it doesn't get a whole lot of action, but when it does, it can, be that we just had a family, their son just turned 5 and is starting to ask, who's God and why do people pray? And that, so, she had questions around tackling that question within her family and what feels comfortable for her and her beliefs. So that's been something that's successful for us. And as you're talking, I started making some notes. I'm re-envisioning a bulletin board already. And I just wrote down some phrases that I might have on there to just sort of invite sharing, having full week faith, living our principles, service is our prayer, and the spiritual life of our family, and just start to get people sharing like all that good stuff, whether it's an artifact or a picture or a little blurb or something. So I think I want to play around with that in some conversations and see if I can get, of course, if I introduce it in a moment for all ages, that'll get people really thinking. So I'm kind of excited about that. I hope it takes off.
Yeah. That's great. And Leslie has posted here, some people in the congregation appear to be concerned that focusing on families means taking resources away from people that don't have children in their households. That's so funny because I just did several weeks ago, I did a startup for a new staff person at a congregation up in New York State who was hired to be the director of family ministry. And we did a little brainstorm exercise. There were 25 or 30 people in this room, and we did a brainstorm exercise around what does family mean to you? What does family bring up for you? And we came up with a list where a lot of the older people in the room who might not be actively parenting, they were like, oh my goodness, of course, family means connection, family means safety, family means all these different things. And they kind of, so it could be a language issue as well. So inviting people to think about what are the feelings that the idea of family brings up for you. And of course, for some people, family is not a thing. That a biological family might not be something that is a positive image for them, but the found family, the family that they've created through church, can be a very powerful and meaningful image for them to think about when they think about what family means. That's, I acknowledge that can be a barrier, that can be a place where people push back. And I think, part of it is just challenging them to go a little deeper. Searching for a term other than family ministry. You're not the first person that I've heard that has expressed that. We've tried lots of different things. We've tried multi-generational. We've tried lifespan. We're trying family ministry. And sometimes we have to try things out and experiment with different kinds of messaging and see what might work. No, I don't have an answer for that. If somebody else does, jump in. But I think it's also what we're doing. It's also it reflected in life phase. I haven't heard of that. other faith traditions use life phase ministry. I have not heard that used in a Unitarian Universalist context, but I'm going to write that one down and see if it pops up anywhere else. Yeah, I mean that's related to lifespan, although it's more about, it kind of sends a message that rather than the whole, it's about the sort of the individual developmental stages. Yeah, so that's a tricky place. I mean, one way to do that is, or to kind of push back against that is through your messaging and through the messaging of other people. And honestly, family ministry has got to be owned by the minister in a congregation, as well as the religious educator. As long as that message is coming out of the religious educator's corner, then it's really hard for people to see it through a lens other than the lens of children and youth. If you encourage the minister to actually use that terminology and to talk about families in different ways, it can begin to take on a slightly different character for people. There are still going to be people who push back. And, I guess the question also is, what are they pushing back against? They're pushing back against change, and change is loss. And yeah, we're in a time where there's plenty of change happening around us. So, but I appreciate that you're raising that point, Leslie. So, anything else anyone has? I've got 7:58, and we're going to just take a moment to close. I don't have anything else in terms of, whoops, you don't want to share my screen anymore, right? Anything else anybody wants to share tonight? I appreciate everybody being here. Jessica, Jess on the phone, Lizzie, Leslie, and somebody else. Did Jennifer make it? No, Jennifer didn't make it. Okay. All right, friends. Well, thanks for being with me tonight, and we'll see you again next month. Take care. Bye.
Thank you.